This is the Shoe on Head video that I meant to react to the other day. So let's check it out. The male loneliness epidemic.
From their pornography addictions.
You deserve real love.
Turns out the society that was built by and allegedly for men has indeed let them down. Now you might be thinking, oh look, another boo-hoo poor men video by ShoeOnHead. Yes. And if you have a problem...
Yeah, she gets an incredible amount of like shade and just annoyed, miserable people coming after her just because she makes videos where she comes at it and tries to understand male perspectives is actually pretty wild.
With that, tune into literally anything else. Men are in a crisis and it seems nobody really cares. And the people who do care just seem like the people who want to sell them shit. Not me. I'm different. So before we get into this, let's quickly get into today's sponsor.
I feel like people equally do not care about like female loneliness. Like there's a lot of similar discussion on female loneliness, and it's also kind of just glossed over and considered, oh well, that's their problem, they're doing things wrong, and that's kind of a harsh way to focus on any kind of issue that people are having.
It's a young Austrian company that designed.
Because
thank you, the viewer, as always, for not
a
skipping
lot of
the ad.
people who have issues, like social issues, is because there's something going on internally that doesn't give them the skills that they need. Well, some have just never developed them and have the capacity to, but a lot of people genuinely just don't have that capacity to. There's certain barriers in place that just don't allow them to see things that everyone else sees.
Why are men and boys struggling? And what should we do about it?
A few new studies have come out that have shown that young men are more lonely and single than ever before. But it's not just men. The women and children, too. It's predicted 45% of women will be single and childless by 2030. But according to the media, this is a good thing. The she-economy is booming, as they say. And meanwhile, men being single...
This economy. Wow, that's completely absurd.
...is treated like this.
New study explains why some single men are having a hard time finding a new partner.
Some of the music that they listen to speaks very derogatory.
Right. Yeah, men, stop listening to that derogatory music. Then maybe you won't be single. I don't know, I think men and women being single and lonely kind of shows there might be something wrong with society. Perhaps we should address this, not just wave it off as empowering or pathetic.
I couldn't agree more. So many people just like wave this off, just these people have these issues or whatever and they need to just fix it, it's on them. That is very difficult for people to do. That's very difficult for people who are like very competent, effective, hardworking people, right? The YouTuber Shay Carl, watch his videos about his life and his mindset and how he's changed it and grown over the years. I know he had a big controversy at one point, and people like to highlight that, but like that's just such a small part of that person. But he's really done some like incredible introspection and analysis of himself and people that he knows.
I read about it on the internet. Research shows that people from individualist countries show a greater sense of loneliness. This is linked to socioeconomic development, increased education, a shift towards white-collar jobs, and urbanization. Japan also has an issue with loneliness. In fact, they have a whole movement of people they call the hikikomori. Did I say that right? I don't care. Basically, postmodern.
Ad blocker, lack thereof, hits again.
Mostly young men who completely withdraw from society, secluding themselves in their rooms for months and years at a time. In 2010, there was an estimated
years at a time. What?
In Japan, and today it's estimated to be about 1.55 million. And because of things like this, people
what? 1.55 million? They're just totally secluded. That's wild.
having babies, so Japan's population has been in a sharp decline since 2011. It's gotten so bad that Japan even produces videos of live-action women staring into the camera to help the hikikomori learn to cope with eye contact and reintegrate them back into society. So basically, if you want to know America's future, look no further than Japan. A lot of people, including myself, blame this partially on the rise of social media and technology. RIP to
Alright, I'm just going to get into my opinions on this right away. I think that's a good jumping off point. So people talk about social media and how it's ruined dating. And I don't think it has at all. I think it has absolutely had the opposite effect. I think it's just an excuse people use to not focus on where they're struggling.
the king. Although technology makes things easier, it can also make us more atomized. Why?
It can, but no. It making things easier counteracts that atomization, which is just be like a reduction, like kind of like a watering down, you could say. Just a different way of saying that. Like, yes, there is more of this like quasi relationship, semi relationship. There's all kinds of goofy terms as to these sorts of things where you're like sort of dating somebody, but it's not a relationship. I think that just is an aspect of dating, right? And I think people who say that like dating is destroyed because of that, they're in their mind they're separating that from dating and relationships, when really it's kind of like a part of that, right? Because it's difficult. You got to think about how people communicate. It's more easy to communicate with a ton of people at once. Like, it's always going to be easy. So it's like very normal for somebody to regularly be in conversations digitally with like 20 plus people at a time, right? Up to like 100 people at a time. And some of those are going to be like a little bit romantic. Some of them aren't. So you're going to have like multiple of these like quasi relationships, but most of them are like meaningless, and people are willing to just like cut them off, stop talking to whoever once a real relationship like presents itself, right? Once they get to that point with somebody. But yeah, there's a bigger existence of this like weird gray area, but I think it's just more that people decide that they refuse to navigate that when you kind of should navigate it, because otherwise you're just like not really, you're just making it way harder on yourself.
Why go to the mall when I can just tap, 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 buy a new microphone and have it shipped to me in a day? Why hang out with friends when I can...
I should really buy a new microphone. The one I'm using is a piece of dirt. Like, it has a little tripod and it has a like pop filter, but yeah, it's not high quality. Like, I have it set very well on the desk, but I get this like talking into a tin can effect, and I haven't really looked into how to fix that too much, but I've done like tiny things and it is just disastrous. But obviously what she means is you can just at any point in dating press a button and boom, you have another relationship immediately. And yeah, maybe that makes people more willing to leave relationships because they have access to other ones. But I don't really buy that.
I can get all my social interaction I need from Twitter and streamers. Why go on dates and bother meeting women when I could just tap, 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 Google big boob and get 2 million results? Or see my high school crush's holes on OnlyFans for only $5. Instant dopamine, instant satisfaction, and hey, who even needs a real woman when you can just have an AI girlfriend? We're so f***ed. Dating apps really are the great Satan. I'm convinced they've completely broken men's brains. Women on dating apps are picky. Women in general are picky, and I mean, naturally we are pickier. You know, we're the ones who carry the babies, at least for now. But on dating apps, you have to admit, it's a little insane.
It's interesting when people talk about these kind of statistics where how men rate women and how women rate men. Whereas it's hard to really put into words. So men will rate women as an even distribution, like a logical distribution of like rating them. I assume it's like 1 to 10 or whatever kind of rating system, but it's like an actual accurate distribution, whereas like women's is like way off. Like they just stack the like least attractive, which doesn't make any sense, right? Like that's impossible. Like that's such a weird distribution of people.
It's safe to say that the commodification of love and the window shopping of dating apps probably has to do a lot with the rise of lonely single men. Men are not just lonely when it comes to dating, they're lonely when it comes to friendship too. According to Vox, Americans are currently in a friendship recession, and men are being hit the hardest. The percentage of men who reported having at least 6 close friendships fell in half since the 90s. 1 in 5 men say they have no close friendships. Looking at all these statistics, the explosion of figures like Andrew Tate is not surprising at all.
I believe being a man is a blessing because it starts so different. I believe that every man is born without any value at all. I think that the world's never going to think you're important unless you make yourself important.
And recently, a new study came out about how young men are moving towards the right. And every other month, we, the liberal, sockdom, leftist, whatever you want to call this space online, performs the same song and dance. What's wrong with men? People are picky, and I mean, naturally we are pickier. You know, we're the ones who carry them. It's safe to say that, at least for now. But on dating apps, you have to admit, it's a little insane.
So this part I wanted to touch on a little bit more. I had to gather my thoughts for a second. An important part about this is how people respond to this, more important than this information, right? Because you got to look at this chart and understand what it's saying, right? All that it's saying is that men are more attracted to women than women are attracted to men. But that's only based off of physical appearance, right? They're probably just rating the attractiveness of OkCupid profiles, right? And there's not enough on any dating profile to really get a sense of who anyone really is, right? Unless they have like incredibly detailed pictures that really paint a picture of who they are and tell a story. Even then, you're not really getting the vibe, right? Like, say somebody's like really artistic or whatever, and they like to do these other specific hobbies. Maybe they demonstrate that through a series of like pictures that get that message across of who they are, but you're not really getting that sense of them, right? They could be a total like douche, or they could be like, you know, the greatest person in the world, and you would never know because you aren't getting that information, right? So this is just basing how they view like physical appearance and like kind of like that first impression just based off physical appearance that you would get from viewing a dating app. Viewing a dating profile is so meaningless because that's all it is. That's all it ever will be, is that, right? So ultimately this graph it means nothing, right? Women so often, and men are the same way, but women in particular, they just don't care about this attractiveness. They really don't. Like, I hear this, people will make the point that this like, say there's 2% on this graph here in the how women rate men category. So the very top 2% of men, they'll talk about how that 2% of men can get like the top, like, you know, they can hook up with a huge majority of women. And that's not necessarily the case because there's several other things at play where, like, women will not date a guy if he's like a certain astrological sign or has a certain eye color or whatever, like any kind of like weird, specific, uncontrollable thing. Women will just write a man off entirely, regardless of if he's in that 2% or if he's not. So it's really, when I see things like this, it's so clearly an excuse. That's all that people are getting out of it. They're misreading what this is really saying, and they're using that as an excuse as to why dating is so difficult for them, instead of kind of like looking at themselves and what they're doing and what they could be doing differently, right? Because like there's women who will like exclusively date like big, obese, bearded men because that's what they're into, right? And it can be like literally like a woman who's in the top like 10% of women who that's what she likes, right? Or there's women who like, you know, this and this specific thing, or like a guy with tattoos, or a guy who owns a motorcycle, something that like any man could just do, could just acquire, something that's super obtainable for like most men. So this initial physical attraction, it's so meaningless. It's meaningless to women. Trust me, it is, right? Like there is, in all of the interactions I've had with women, it does not matter, right? Like certain things matter. Like I'm not going to say it 100% doesn't matter, but the thing that matters so much more is your like personality. If you're outgoing, if you're fun, if you're funny, if you can hold a conversation, if you show interest in them, this physical attraction is so meaningless. And also men kind of have this like generic look to them. Like as long as you don't do three things, right? As long as you can be clean, like clean enough, like you're not like, you don't have like incredibly dirty hair and like clothes. If you don't go bald, like if you're like horribly balding and you just have like a terrible head of hair, and if you just don't get like obese, as long as you just aren't obese, super bald and dirty, then you're good. Like you're good. Like it's so easy. Even if a guy's like balding, just wear a hat, just cover it up, just comb over. Like it's literally an issue that you can get past until you're like 60 years old. So using it as an excuse to be lonely in your like 20s or your 30s makes zero sense, right? And it's just so funny to me see this excuse be used so many times online when really it's actually like it kind of demonstrates the opposite of what people think that it demonstrates. What it's actually demonstrating is how little women care about appearance.
We, the liberal, sockdom, leftist, whatever you want to call the space online, performs the same song and dance. What's wrong with men? Why is this happening? Why don't we have a leftist Andrew Tate? We need to push men to the left. Andrew Tate rarely, if ever, talks about politics. Andrew Tate talks about men, and the left only talks about men when they talk about Andrew Tate. A few months ago, during one of the monthly...
I kind of don't really understand leftist hatred for Andrew Tate. I mean, he just kind of tells men to focus on themselves and making money and like building a home and increasing their own value, right? Which part of that is like how you treat others and like showing leadership and like really positive traits that like leftists seem to care a lot about like society and social dynamics and stuff. So somebody who has this like positive message for men, you think they would kind of be on the side of it, right?
Song and dances, some progressive people I follow made the mistake of addressing men's issues, and the even bigger mistake of pointing their finger at their own spaces for not doing enough to address said men's issues.
Recently,
I find leftists often in these kind of conversations kind of miss the point that like women, the huge majority of women are into men. So if those men can fix their issues on their own, you know, like how could that possibly end up being a bad thing for women? It doesn't make any sense.
we're are some statistics by healthcare company Cigna.
Because like women end up in relationships with men, the majority of women, like that's what happens in life. So those men being like better at life, better at their career, better, more focused, more capable, that benefits women a lot. Like,
indicating that men are the loneliest generation. And addressing it doesn't mean that you turn your back on issues pertaining to women.
as we saw in that video the other day, it's women too, right? Like, I don't know why the men get focused on so much, because women talk about these exact same issues with like dating apps and these like semi quasi pseudo relationships. They seem to have an even bigger problem with it than men do, honestly, because men, when you can point out to men the idea that like, hey, you can be in a relationship, you can get all the benefits of a relationship without actually being in one, and that's just how what society has shifted to. And then once these young men get the perspective of, say, like older men, well, like, this is gonna sound bad, but like older men will tell you like, once you get married, all the fun stops, blah, 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 blah. Don't get married and stuff like that. And they explain why and how, like, the early phases of a relationship are the best phases, the best part, because everything kind of goes downhill, and they go into, like, specifics as to why that is and how, like, the romance fades away. Being able to get those good times, those good parts of a relationship, without having to be very forced to rush into the bad, less desirable parts of the relationship, that's great, right? Like, that's pretty cool. That's kind of a nice thing to exist in our culture.
But it does mean that we should be focused on what it is in society that is leading to this epidemic, what the left can do to offer solutions, and how we can basically fight back against the more nefarious figures who have filled the void that, you know, men are struggling with, people like Jordan Peterson and what have you. Now, recently, Bosch, who's a popular streamer, had tweeted this thread that I think is really, really important to address. He writes, "I cannot stress enough how important it is to understand that 12-year-old white boys on Twitch are not being pulled into fascism because of some Machiavellian desire to preserve and expand."
I remember this quote from Vosh, and it's actually one of the few good ones he has. He's the Omega strawman. Most of what he ever does is just strawmanning people, and it's really like ridiculous. But I believe he made a good point here, where the right wing like talks to men and doesn't talk down to them, doesn't like try to shame them at all times for everything, stuff that like these men haven't even done or been a part of, and are often like actively against.
And their privileges. It's because the right talks to them.
Again, like, I think this also just distracts from the overall point, right? Because my point is always to help people, show men and women how to be less lonely, how to get what they want out of dating, relationships, and what have it, and how to get there a lot more easily and a lot more smoothly, a lot faster. And part of that is getting over these excuses and stop focusing on politics. That's the best thing you can do in your life, is don't see things as like left wing and right wing, because that is just a complete clown show, right? Like, anybody with any sense can see straight through it that it's just a way to divide people. Like, it's so ultimately meaningless. Like, take for example the 2016 presidential election. Like, Hillary and Bill Clinton were at Donald Trump's wedding to Melania, and Donald Trump was like a registered Democrat. Donald Trump campaigned with a pride flag like draped around his shoulders at one point, like, and like part of his campaign was to like do things to help gay people, help black people. So it's just so weird to see so much divisiveness in modern times when really it's like we should be collectively seeing through these ridiculous political ideas that we have to be at the polar extremes of like political boxes and be at complete constant combat with each other and see literally something as basic as male and female as being right wing and left wing. Like, that's ridiculous. That is absolutely ridiculous. Stop trying to divide people. That's not really what like life is about. It's never gonna help you like getting into politics and getting into this divisiveness and being like, oh, this side is like evil and they don't care about this and this because this and this reason. It's just so meaningless.
And the left
It's fun to talk about and analyze, but like it's ultimately a total clown show, and that's what the ShoeOnHead channel is all about, right? Like, she just sees through that absurdness of politics.
So these tweets and this content were very normal, level-headed, and respectful. Me when I lie. LMAO, cry about it. Boo f***ing who? Oh no, poor widow men having problems. Boo f***ing who? Grow the f*** up then. Have men considered being smarter? I'm enjoying all these sad little moids and their sad little tweets about their sad, pathetic lives.
I mean, that's a pretty funny thing to tweet, because it's like you're trying to sit there and say that you are like above these men, whatever group of men, and I don't know if it's the incels or whoever it is, right, who are on Twitter talking about these issues of loneliness. First of all, it's a totally reasonable thing to do. Really weird to go after somebody for that, but to try to sit there and act like you're better than somebody else because you're sitting around reading through a bunch of posts from that group of people, and you're like, oh, like you're on your high horse and you're like laughing at them, they're so beneath you. It's like you're literally spending your time focusing on this group of people and like reading what they have to say. If anything, that makes you like infinitely lamer than them and more pathetic and more sad.
Sounds like a personal problem. Is the lack of compassion for men in the room with us right now? Maybe men are just not good people then. I'm so fucking tired of people trying to make male loneliness a huge societal problem. Yeah, no, their fifis are not my responsibility, and I shouldn't have to be punished because they can't get their shit together as human beings. Grow the up. Why are we trying to win these entitled little predators over? The left isn't for them. That's why they go right in the first place. We're all lonely and alienated. It's young men going to the alt-right in droves. The problem isn't our messaging, it's them. It's literally not our problem. Men flock to Andrew Tate not because they're lonely, but because they're bigots. Hope this helps. Nah, it's just misogynists being louder than before and not getting laid. LOL. Cry harder, losers. 90% of all homicides recorded worldwide were committed by male perpetrators. We should just get rid of all males, to be honest. This includes trans women, as they still retain male violence. By the way, you know the Tumblr feminists who are like, all men are sexist.
It's like a J.K. Rowling style tweet.
Rapists, male peers, penises are evil, blah 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 back in the day. Well, this is them now. Should've just let me cook back then. Listen up, chuckle. I'm white, socially awkward, autistic, in my 40s, ugly, overweight, crippled, got a weird balding pattern, and have bad skin. You know what I didn't do? Choose to become a fascist, because I recognize most of the sort that look like me are the problem. I may be hideously ugly and pathetic, but at least I'm not a fascist. Thank you for your input, buddy. You're, really helping the situation. The reason young men flock to alt-right MRA movements is because the left...
Yeah, that was such a weird thing for somebody to say, like, I have all these issues and I don't resolve any of them, but at least I'm not a fascist. It's like, who's a fascist? Like, you're actually finding fascists on social media? Like, do you follow a bunch of people from Ukraine, like, in Russia? Like, where are you finding these fascists?
Gives brain-dead advice to young men. We need to be more compassionate to them, for our own sake. I'm sorry, but how is respect women brain-dead advice? What advice? Don't rape? Don't be a rapist is bad advice? Help, I have no friends or community, I feel suicidal. Have you considered not raping? Act like a decent fucking human being, it's not hard, is brain-dead advice? Brain-dead.
Yeah, that's extremely brain dead advice. Like, you're just kind of weirdly assuming that people aren't acting like decent human beings and aren't treating women as people. Like, why would you assume that? That's just bizarre. Like, it's just complete and utter nonsense. You don't know what you're talking about, people. Like, why would you just jump to assuming the worst out of an entire group of people? That's nonsense.
Advice like, get consent and don't be a Nazi and women are people. Walking up to men struggling with loneliness and depression, like...
Again, like, like, are you talking to people from Ukraine? Like, where you encountering anybody who's a Nazi? Like you would have to dig pretty deep. I'm not saying they don't exist, but they're like an incredibly small group of people. Like ShoeOnHead has an American flag behind her. Let's just say in America, like, you're gonna have to dig pretty deep. They don't really have too much of a presence outside of like prisons. In prisons, it's mostly just like, I need to be in a gang. This is the gang I'm gonna be in for my own safety.
Like,
kids, don't be racist.
Incredible. Here's my actual advice I would give to my teen boys as a leftist. 1. Always get enthusiastic consent. 2.
This is just terrible advice. Like, what does that mean, enthusiastic consent? Like, that just... No idea what that means.
Save the planet. 3.
Like, do these people not realize that women will be like, yeah, choke me, yeah, like, bend me over. Like this is stuff that women say to men. Like I've literally... I won't get into the crazy things that I've heard and experienced, but there's plenty of women out there who are not into that at all, and they make it very clear they're not into that, and it's probably like most women.
3.
Realistically.
Don't say that. It's actually...
Also, like, save the planet. Like, what is that? Like, what? I don't, like, these people are so brain dead. Like, it's such a good term to describe them, because, like, what are they even talking about here?
kind of racist. Like, what the f is this? How does this address men and their issues? It doesn't. Why does their advice always seem to be, become a liberal? Hey men, here's how to fix all your problems. Agree with me politically. Men...
Which is just the worst advice you could ever give somebody. I mean, you're never going to be... That's the complete opposite advice I would give anybody.
Flock to the MRA movement because they're the largest beneficiaries of MRA shit. Imagine saying women flock to women's rights activism because they're the biggest beneficiaries of women's rights. Like, no f***ing shit. Let's be honest. Aside from procreation purposes, men have become obsolete. Most women can find other methods of achieving orgasm without a man.
Because most... there's this weird... I used to watch a lot of videos about neckbeards, and it seems like a lot of people who react to neckbeards have this conception, this weird perception that neckbeards are like right-wing guys, and all the ones I've ever interacted with at all are left-wing people. So like, I don't know where they're getting that from.
And speaking as a man,
And once you like think about the values and the perceptions that these people have, you can understand why that is the case very easily. That left-wing men are like make up most of these kinds of men. these very lonely men.
Most of us are horrid to be around, and I don't blame any woman for just saying, no thanks. Oh my god, dude, this is what every Just Pearly Things tweet looks like to me, just with the genders swapped. This is pathetic. You know what fixes male loneliness? F***ing off. As a man, I'll say this. Sit down, shut up, and beat one out. You'll feel better, I promise. Yeah, guys, just beat one out. Just f*** off, just watch porn. That man will be very disappointed in all of you. It's so funny how men feel entitled to a girlfriend. No, you sexist freak. When one side is like, wanting a girlfriend is sexist entitlement, and the other side is like, here's how to get a girlfriend. I don't know, bro. What happened to males just kicking the bucket? Now they just come on here and try to make their loneliness and misery into some social justice issue. Oh, trust me, men are still kicking the bucket. And when they're not giving mind-blowing advice like just to be a liberal, they're outright dismissing men's issues completely. It's not our job to educate them. Since men created the problem, they need to take steps to fix it.
Like, men haven't created the problem. A statistic that is very interesting that people never bring up and is very important to culture and society at large. I saw, now I don't know if this statistic was accurate, but I could see how it probably is. It's that women make 80% of consumer decisions. And I believe that statistic because any kind of household that I've ever been in, women are deciding often how the house is decorated, what kind of food you're buying, like what brands and stuff, what kind of clothes, like pretty much everyone in the household is buying, like where money is going to go towards spending for like kind of like family hobbies or individual hobbies, what vehicle the family needs, right? Like just my whole life I've seen so much of that where like women kind of have a huge say on how spending goes. So the statistic, it could very easily be true, and if that's the case, then women really hold way more power than they realize. By holding that one power, they really hold all of the power because we live in a capitalist society, right? Where companies are constantly looking for your business, ways to get your business, right? Our entire society is structured around that more and more so. So like, in a way, society in general is really geared towards women because you have all of the powers of the world are trying to get money out of people. That's their main focus, right? So women just have way more power than they realize that they do because they control most of men's money, right? They control their own money, then they control most of the money that men make, right? And most of the stuff that men buy, plenty of stuff that men buy are to like attract women, to be like appealing to women. Like they work towards saving up for a house or whatever so then they can have a family, right? Like it's all in service of eventually having a family. So I mean, in many, many ways, our society is capitalistic, and thus our society is entirely structured around servicing and benefiting women. So blaming men for a lot of these issues is just illogical. This idea that society is built by men for men, no, like never has that been the case.
We have other things to care about.
I mean, yeah, maybe like business structures kind of a little, but like that's really changed a lot. Like that hasn't been a thing for like decades. Like pretty much throughout the 80s and 90s that shifted towards, that's just completely changed. And you can't just ignore that it's changed entirely, that workplaces have completely changed And now they have tons of women.
And y'all need to address that amongst yourselves. Men created their own problems. Men can solve their own problems. The left is busy. Why does the well-being of other people concern me? Leftist, by the way. It's all systemic issues and societal factors and blah 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 until it's a man and then suddenly it's pull yourselves up by your bootstraps. This problem is just a consequence of the patriarchy. Now take a wild guess about which gender created the patriarchy. Solve your own problems and leave women alone. These people rightly mock the bootstraps rhetoric until the subject is a man and then it's bootstraps all the way down. They would never talk about any other group this way. It's wild. And it's kind of like both sides are telling men to pull themselves up by their bootstraps, but one is like, I'll show you how, and the other is like, f*** off. And when they're not...
Exactly that. She hit the nail on the head there. Hit the nail on the shoe on head. Yeah, like, you wonder why somebody like me would say that the last advice I would ever give to a man is to become a liberal, is because of that exact reason. Like, they give no solutions to men. They have this weird idea that men should just, like, be quiet in all scenarios and just do whatever women say at all times, no matter what their proximity is to this woman, like, regardless of their relationship or whatever it may be. It's just, woman, no matter what, you must do what she says and agree with her. Her opinion, just baseline, is way more valuable than yours. And it's like, that's crazy, that's bigoted, that's ridiculous, that's biased, that's unfair, that's unreasonable, like, that's illogical, that's just complete bigotry. That's sexism. That's complete sexism. You're not just automatically more, your opinions are just all more valuable than men's for no reason. That's ridiculous.
Men to straight up
you're a sexist. And like, the fact that I don't even consider people like look at the right wing's response to Andrew Tate. Most of them can't stand them, right? Like, the religious right is completely different than like Andrew Tate. Like, Andrew Tate is all about like being this bombastic celebrity, like Hollywood type guy. As much as he talks about like Hollywood and the Matrix, it's like your entire identity is built around like crafting yourself into a celebrity. That's what you've done, Andrew Tate. You're like, you have more of those like leftist tendencies than most people, and that's why the right wing doesn't like Andrew Tate. And a lot of the stuff that he's done in his past, the religious right, they're like, think that's very immoral, right? Like his promiscuity, or I can't pronounce it right now, but you know what I mean. Like, very different views on
answer that
on dating than the right wing has.
Emotions, bro. And I'm not dismissing this problem, okay? I've made.
And trust me, the right wing, as I say that, I agree more with like Andrew Tate than I do with the right wing, right? Like, I'm more open-minded than right wingers are. I'm not defending right wingers. I'm just saying, like, the left wing is extremely, left wing men are extremely unappealing to women who are left wing, centrist, or right wing. They just are.
8 videos talking about this. Oh, you're crying at your grandfather's funeral? Okay, f it. And studies have shown that men are scared to be vulnerable, even around the homies. And can you blame them when the media says stupid like this? Fellas, is it
Because think about it. Think for a second of the baseline of what being like a left-wing man and a right-wing man are, right? So the right-wing man cares about his family. Maybe even thinks like, oh, we should live off of the grid. Enough of this government. Our family is what's important here. Nothing's going to be more important to him than his like wife and kids, right? Left wing, you're just constantly like caring about like like all this complete and utter nonsense. You're getting like super passionate and heated about things that just don't even make sense to get heated about. You're like, focusing on all these things that aren't your family, that aren't your partner, your wife, your girlfriend, whatever it may be. So like, why would anybody choose the man who's, you know, going on and on about like global warming, or going on and on about like racism, to do with like races that he's like never really even encounters, and is talking for other races as if they're like some kind of monolith, and that he needs to represent because he knows how to represent some other kind of race, right? Like, I've experienced that as a Native person myself. The most racism I've ever encountered is from left-wing men who are white and try to tell me what Native people are, what Native people believe, and what they think and what they agree with, even though they themselves don't know any Native American people. And I am a Native American person, and like my family and tons of friends that I've had, like I know hundreds and hundreds of Native American people, but they'll sit there and they'll tell me what I believe and what my people believe. And it's just these like lunatic, like big city left-wing males, and it's just the wildest, most racist crap ever. And that's what I mean, like they're focused on like weird stuff like that, and they're going on all these tangents about these like social issues that they perceive as like being life or death when they're not at all, instead of focusing on like advancing their career, preparing for a family, being a good husband.
Fellow men and discuss history. Men are socialized to believe strength, dominance, and stoicism are behaviors of a real man. Is it any surprise that men are lonely and have less friends nowadays? You have to be vulnerable to make friends. Don't tell me there aren't systemic problems affecting men. Now, while a lot of this may be true, men have been socialized this way for centuries, and this is all relatively a new phenomenon. Toxic masculinity has existed forever. If anything, there's less toxic masculinity nowadays. The cultural embrace of like gender nonconformity, femboys, Harry Styles in a dress, Barbie movie, blah 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 blah. My point is, toxic masculinity did not just appear in the mid-2010s. And social media...
Exactly. Like, people talk about like Andrew Tate or like Jordan Peterson, even though like I pointed out, they have completely like opposite viewpoints on like sex and relationships, and they're like different, wildly different like ages. Just couldn't be two polar opposite guys than Andrew Tate and Jordan Peterson, but they act like these guys like invented toxic masculinity, or somebody like Donald Trump. Like, Donald Trump is somebody who, again, I'll bring up the 2016 election, had unfavorable ratings, meaning like most people don't like him. Doesn't matter if they're left wing, doesn't matter if they're right wing. People don't like the guy. Like, in general, like if you poll people, the majority of people don't like him, and they also didn't like the other candidate then. So like, that actually is very important. So acting like these people are like somehow these like cult leaders who people like religiously follow, and they've created every issue that currently exists with dating and men, and are responsible for anything that any man has ever done, and anything any man has ever done, all men are responsible for. It's like, it's just so bizarre. Like, people got to get over this like politicizing everything, because there's real issues here of people being lonely, men and women, and you do nobody any good by like talking about like left-wing, right-wing crap. It's so meaningless.
Media did, and the internet did, and the rise of dating apps did, and the housing crisis, and living in a country where the wealth inequality is worse than it was during the Gilded Age. That all happened recently. Oh my god, the privileged life these poor little boys must have, that their biggest problem is being lonely, i.e. so insufferable that nobody wants to sleep with them. So much more pressing than the poor distribution of wealth causing people to suffer food and housing insecurity. Boo-hoo, you're lonely and have no friends and are suicidal when? Because feeling alienated under
Like, a lot of those things go hand in hand. That's exactly why men feel that way, right? And it's literally like the point that this person's arguing doesn't make any sense. because what they're saying is you shouldn't focus on these things because you should focus on wealth distribution and like housing and food. That's literally it's what's causing the problem that these men are having. It's why they're lonely. It's because like they don't have anything. They can't provide anything. It's not their fault that it is that way. And so it's weird to attack people who are literally telling these men, you need to fix these issues. You need to make it so you're not going to be homeless, where you're going to be able to provide food and a place to live, and you're going to have some money to spend, and you're going to be healthy, and you're going to care about yourself and other people and be better at taking care of yourself and other people, and you're going to advance your life, and you're going to progress, and you're going to do great things. Like, why would you dump on a guy who's like telling that to men, who's literally like actively solving this issue, this specific issue that you're saying needs to be focused on, like, which is the issue that's causing the loneliness? It's just this weird nonsense. Like, how do they not see what is causing this loneliness?
Causing people to suffer food and housing insecurity. Boo-hoo, you're lonely.
Like I said, it's we live in a time where it's easier than ever to get dates, to meet new people, but a lot of people just don't have the time. They're working 3 jobs. They don't have time to like engage in all these conversations, right? Like, it's easy for me to say, like, when at the times when I'm single, I can be talking to 100 different women at a time. That's because my career isn't that intensely busy, right? Like, I have some free time to do that kind of stuff, right? Like, I make good money, so that kind of frees up a lot of spare time, and I only have 1 job. So like, people who are broke working 3 jobs, they're not going to have that time. They have all these other issues to focus on. So they are going to be lonely, right? So
have no friends and are
like a big part of solving that is like turning those 3 jobs into 2 jobs into 1 job, and then having the time to focus on yourself and get better at all aspects of life, including dating and being in a relationship, which will make you no longer lonely. Again, like I talked about this in a video I just made about Boogie 2988. It's also not the end all be all being in a relationship, right? Like, it's so perfectly fine if you get into a relationship and you find out, hey, that's not even for me. I thought this would end my loneliness, and it kind of doesn't. Like, I can exist as being single and find ways to no longer be lonely. And maybe that's just like being friends with somebody, or like, I don't know, doing something a little differently.
Suicidal when? Because feeling alienated under capitalism apparently isn't a thing. People are working harder and longer while wages have been stagnant. Men have been dropping out of college like flies. And what does that get you? Poor men. Which, since women are doing amazing in college now, and many are now out-earning men, this most of the time leads to single men, which then leads to lonely men, which leads to depressed men, which leads to the high suicide rate. In my opinion, leftism at a policy level does a great job addressing the shitty material conditions that in part lead to the problems that men are facing, but then absolutely drops the ball when it comes to everything and anything related to men's cultural issues. Many such cases. And why would a struggling man even want to move left when the left appears actively hostile to them?
Exactly. Like, nothing sounds more miserable to me than becoming like a left-wing man and hanging out with left-wing men. Not to say that there isn't like awesome left-wing men, there is, but usually they're never the type of people who are like actively, aggressively left-wing. Just like the aggressively right-wing people are very off-putting, same with the left-wing. But like the right-wing ones, at least they're funny.
The question
and they're
of
less
whether or not
judgmental.
The hashtag online left does enough to appeal the hashtag men has become the question du jour. And like, men have most of the money, authority, and do most of the murdering and assaulting.
The average young man in America isn't Jeff Bezos. Also, why did this mother...
Yeah, and like women are actually dominating in terms of education, and they're like taking over. That sounds like a ridiculous thing to say, but they genuinely are, like, using that education, and they, in many fields of industries, they're out earning men. So
just FBI crime statistics at me. Men do the most murder. Okay?
They like having all of the stuff they don't deserve. They like that. They want it to stay that way because it suits them. Because of the stuff, telling people they're special and deserve all the nice shit that they have, that's going to be an easier sell 10 times out of 10 than like saying, hey, maybe you should have less stuff and other people should have more.
Leftism is when you don't have a lot of stuff. We're gonna take your stuff. You sound like a 65-year-old Fox News boomer's idea of what the left is. Are you a CIA agent? The right is saying to men, you will own a house. You will have beautiful children with your loving wife. You will have privacy. You will have free speech. You will own things, and you will be happy. And the left is like...
They like having all of the stuff they don't deserve.
But don't get me wrong, Republicans will not do shit. The Republican Party will not do shit. The establishment in general will not do shit to help any of this. But the right is at least...
I mean, to be fair, it's kind of ShoeOnHead's whole brand is she gets into the politics of stuff, and also people just actively like tweeted and made videos and made it politicized, so not entirely her fault at all.
Metaphorically, offering men something other than nothing or the eternal HR department. Every time this Discord comes up, there's people like, we need a leftist Andrew Tate. We need masculine role models on the left. But the fact is, it's hard for progressives to organically appeal to men, because a large part of progressivism is oppressive hierarchy, and men are oppressors. Making progressivism look appealing to young men is an uphill battle from the start. And although it's funny to laugh at insane people on Twitter, as always, there have been a lot of left-wing content creators talking about men's issues. If you would have told me this would be a thing 9 years ago, I would not believe you, because anyone talking about men's issues back in the day was called an MRA or a pick-me. But lately I have seen a lot of good pro-men lefty content, and I'll put some links to some below. I don't agree with all the points they say, but I recommend watching. It's much better than...
They like having all of the stuff they don't deserve.
But the issue is a lot of this lefty pro-men content, it's always framed around, how do we get them? As if men are just poor.
Yeah, that sounds incredibly off-putting.
And tools for your personal politics. How do we make the left more appealing to men? How do we stop lonely men from moving to Andrew Tate? Instead of just, how do we help men? And I think that's a really big issue. Both sides seem to treat men as political fodder. Disposable soldiers in the culture war and real war. Anyway, misandry is real. Oh good, finally! And while it doesn't systemically affect cis men, it most certainly affects trans men. Oh, y'all talking about misandry doesn't harm men.
I'm going to end the video here. There's a little bit more of it, but she's pretty much touched on all the important topics here. The people being lonely, it's men and women. It's super complicated. It's an issue people are still working on. It's going to be worse before it gets better. We're in a epic. We're in like just a catastrophe. Like, we kind of never really left the Great Recession truly, and it's like we're in a worse time than the Great Depression. We just have more access to food. Food isn't the issue. Like, we can feed everybody since we have processed food, we have synthetic food. We're set, right? In a way that they just weren't back then. They didn't have the way to transport mass amounts of food and just generate it from nothing in the way that we kind of do. So people aren't like, not that many people are starving on the streets. I mean, some people are, but realistically we have people People have way less money than they should have, and it's crazy. Things are so absurdly expensive. So people are really struggling. The amount of people I know who have multiple jobs is just wild. It's just absolutely insane. And that's going to take some adjustment. Hopefully that changes. Hopefully things get a lot better for everybody. But it's going to take time, and people are going to continue to be very, very lonely. And just simply, they just don't have time to really address these issues. So when people, whether it be Andrew Tate or whoever, can find a way to like help people deal with those issues in a very quick, clear, and concise way, well, that's kind of a good thing. I don't like Andrew Tate. I really don't like him. Some of his like views on certain things I find really off, but like overall, I can't deny that he has some really good messages. Even like the Fresh and Fit podcast, I don't like those guys at all, but they say some things that are absolutely correct. So there's value there. So they should never, you should never just dismiss somebody entirely based off like one clip of them or some opinion that they might have held at one moment in time. You gotta kind of really see what message they're getting across as like an overall. What is their core message, and how often do they deviate from that? And are people picking up that core message or not, right? Hope you like this video. I don't purposely make these really long reactions. I just kind of like find a video. Like I'm not even 19 minutes into this video, and the video is already an hour long. It's just I really like to delve deep in these topics because dissecting them helps people find out what might be making them lonely and what's making other people lonely and ways they might be able to solve that. Seeing somebody else solve a problem that you have is even if you can't even solve it in the exact same way due to circumstances, it's still going to help you. And that's what I hope these videos are doing. I want to make a lot more. I'm basically actively searching for more videos on this type of topic. So if you know of any, shout them out in the comments below. I'd love to hear from people. I'd love to be able to like analyze what people are doing wrong and doing right in these scenarios. Like what is leading to these people being lonely on an individual specific basis, right? Because a lot of times it's things that are an easy fix, and a lot of people can get caught in that same trap where it's just one or two quick fixes can change everything for them. And I would love to be able to help people find those and solve those and just improve their life. Positive vibes. Surround yourself with positive people. Life always gets better. You just get better at life as it goes. I guarantee you that's what will happen to you.